Hai, welcome to Kremés podcast.
Podcast yang paling receh and garing, but maybe informative too, depending on the day.
I'm T.
And I'm A,
Semoga podcast ini bisa nemenin lo.
and hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey, Kremés fam, it's your girl T. How's it going? Hope you're all doing well and staying safe during these obviously unprecedented times. Previously, I think episode 2 and 3, we did discuss already about COVID and lockdown and what we've been doing at home, trying to stay sane and stay physically active and mentally healthy during the lockdown situation. But obviously, as time has passed, it's been a couple of months already since that conversation, and the world has changed and lots of different things have been evolving as well with this pandemic. I guess, as all of you probably are aware of, I was in the US for almost just over half a year. And when I was there, I witnessed the start of COVID lockdown in most states, including the state I was living in, as well as Black Lives Matter. And, just as I was leaving the US, balik ke Aussie, the presidential elections began to kick off. So there was so much stuff going on. From like a US perspective, but also like a global world perspective. Jadi ya mungkin minggu ini gue pengen ngobrol secara like just a brain dump lah gitu about my experiences, witnessing all of that, and how I guess my opinions on how they dealt with things, as well as comparing it with Aussie and mungkin juga also Indo, because gue sih sekarang lagi sering ngobrol sama temen gue yang balik di Jakarta, atau juga ada beberapa teman yang di Jogja, and we've just been discussing about the differences and the similarities of how different countries and cultures are dealing with coronavirus and how they're dealing with quarantine and health protocols. So it's an interesting conversation. I hope you can join us with it. And if you're currently quarantining, or if you're living, whether you're living in Australia or Indo or even somewhere else, feel free to let us know how you're coping and how your specific area is dealing with the quarantine. Jadi gua balik ke Aussie dari US at the start of August. Nah, I had to, like, normally in my area where I was staying in the US, ada bandara, there was an airport there, but because of COVID, flights were very limited there. Jadi gue harus nyetir 1.5 jam ke 2 jam gitu to go to a bigger airport so that I could get a much easier flight path. Because obviously there's just a lot of things to consider, and obviously booking flights during this period is just so complicated. And even when you book a flight, it could cancel at any time. Gue ada teman satu yang book flight dari Singapore ke Aussie, such a short distance, and yet it got cancelled within like 48 hours of the actual flight. So changes could constantly evolve, and obviously my original return date to Australia was cancelled. I had to actually extend my stay in the US for 3 more months, basically find an Uber because there was no buses available for a 1.5 hour drive. I had to Uber, which is an additional cost, but at least an Uber, less exposure to other people, hopefully. I'm safe now, so thank goodness. But jadi dari Amrik gue transit di Dubai, abis itu ke Perth langsung, dan untung gue dapet flight route yang langsung ke Perth, karena setahu gue because obviously we're in Perth, it's not I guess the most popular destination. Usually when you go to Australia, it's normally Sydney or Melbourne, and a lot of the flight options took you to Sydney or Melbourne, and then you did a domestic flight to Perth. But if I took that route, I would have to quarantine, as far as I know, 2 weeks at each of the Australian cities I arrived in. Jadi kalau gue arrive-nya di Sydney atau Melbourne dulu, gue harus karantina 2 minggu di Sydney, Melbourne, baru terbang ke Perth. Abis itu tambah 2 minggu lagi karantina di hotel. Itu kan that's probably not the best situation. So I was desperate to find a flight path that took straight to Perth. And to be honest, it was a bit of a stressful period because obviously it's not cheap flights, and I was already on a dwindling student budget, and beside the budget aspect, you have to also consider the health aspect, right? Kayak setiap airport ada rules and regulations sendiri with regards to, do you need a COVID negative certificate to show in check-in before you fly? What to bring, what PPE to wear, blah, blah, blah. And each airport had their own regulations. So I had to make sure that I was kept up to date and, I followed all the rules and I provided all the paperwork required, because if I don't, then they can simply say, oh, you can't board on the flight. And it was just going to be a nightmare situation if I couldn't, fly, as well as, obviously the whole risk of, will the flight cancel at any point? Jadi ya beneran touch and go. It was like finger on the pulse each and every day. I was checking my emails to see if the airline would cancel my flight because, who knows what happens. Sebenarnya sih flight gua, it got cancelled, so I had to actually rebook. And then they were like, oh, the next available date is like 20 days away or 3 days before your original flight. Jadi actually I had to really change up my schedule because I decided to pick the earlier flight date. So because I had a shorter time to prepare and whatever before I flew back home, I had, my change. Pokoknya schedule gue campur adul lah gitu, teracak. Tapi ya, during these times, kita yang penting harus, pokoknya safety first, health first, yeah. And I guess whatever gets you home is obviously the best option. But I think it's also really important that during this time, we need to stay flexible, we need to stay resilient, and I guess strong in mind and in body, because, there's just so much changes going on. Nah, pas gue udah balik ke Perth, safe and sound, the whole flight experience was already like strange. I mean, it was definitely less passengers in a flight, which is great for me because that means more legroom, more space and stuff. But there's definitely, like people are trying to sanitize everything and blah, blah, blah. But to be honest, like with the whole hype of social distancing, like once you get in a plane, people would like, screw that. Like, in the flight that I was on from the States to Dubai, people were kind of just like normal, no social distance, no nothing. There was a couple of people, obviously we were all wearing masks still, but there weren't many people kind of like being super paranoid and spraying everything and sanitizing everything. So that was an interesting outlook. Tapi yang pesawat ke Australia itu yang lebih strict, karena Australia they have a cap on the number of passengers arriving from international travel into Perth. I'm sure it's the same thing for Sydney and Melbourne and other cities in Australia. But for us, the cap is about 520, I think, per day of international arrival. So that means pesawat kita, there was only 50 people in total. The entire plane, only 50 people were allowed to be in the flight, which to me, it was like, that's great because a lot of space, a lot more leg room. I was flying economy and I was able to literally use the whole row and sleep fully flat. So I was just happy days. Like, I rarely can sleep on a flight. So I was actually able to miraculously sleep on a flight home, which is great. After I arrived, did the whole check-in, did the whole police security check, reason why you're arriving in Australia, blah, blah, blah. Imigrasi, karantina, abis itu, initial quarantine check for your baggage and stuff. And then they literally whisk you away on a public transport bus and they take you to the hotel. And I guess the hotel experience is definitely one for the books. It's probably something that I will, tell my kids because they'll probably never experience it. But it's definitely interesting. It's 14 days straight. They're very strict about the time that you come in is the exact time you come out. You're not allowed outside of your hotel room, so you stay inside the hotel the whole time. There's a couple of hotels that are participating. Yeah, and I guess different hotel beda ya. Tapi gua punya sih, gua ada jendela, so I can look out, but there is no, like, I can't open a window, so I have to breathe the same air for 14 days straight. And for me sih karena gue suka gampang alergi udara, debu gitu sih. So like it wasn't really good for me. I was kind of like dying. But I mean, like, obviously the first few days, like, woo, this is cool, like, hotel life, free Wi-Fi, yeah, big bed, all that kind of stuff. But it's like after day 3 and onwards, it starts to dawn on you that it's like, I have exhausted all I can do in this hotel room, and yet there is still like 11 days to go. So my days was pretty much spent catching up with work, with on the internet, and then if I got bored, I, switched on the telly, the TV, atau enggak, tidur. I took naps, I guess, took way more naps than I normally do. Took a lot more showers than I normally do, just because the shower was there. It was like provided, and it was all kind of fancy. I mean, the hotel was nice, but the amenities that make that hotel nice I can't access, so might as well make the most of the room that I had, right? Hey, tapi ya sebenarnya ya, like, it's really, like, for me, it took a toll on my mental health a bit, because, you're kind of confined in a box, and to me, I call it's kind of like bougie jail in a way. It's like political prisoner, house arrest, what have you. And then makanannya sih, mereka kan kirimin makanan 3 kali sehari. But it's not like room service or anything. They're not allowed to come into your room. They can't even touch your luggage or anything. You have to do everything yourself. So they would knock on the door, and then I have to kind of wait a little bit so that the server goes away, because I need to keep social distance. And then I would open the door, and like the food is on the floor. They put it in like a takeaway bag. Everything is in a takeaway container. And then that's it, and I eat. And then, like, I have to put my waste outside of the door. And then, hotels, normally they have laundry service, and they change your beds for you. Well, obviously not for here. They give you like a set of sheets that you have to change yourself. So it was definitely a nightmare changing a king size bed that's so heavy, and I'm a very small person, so yeah, that wasn't fun. Anyways, that's essentially kind of like my quarantine experience so far. I mean, so I'm out of quarantine now. I've been 2 weeks out of quarantine. Parents picked me up, so now I'm just finally breathing in fresh air and adjusting to non-hotel, non-confined life, I guess, which is great, obviously. But during the hotel, obviously, people can send you care packages. You can order Uber Eats. You can order stuff online to get delivered to your hotel room. So it wasn't that bad, to be honest. And look, like, we are in WA, definitely sending all our love to the guys in the eastern states, but also other cities in Australia. But in WA, we've been very fortunate that our cases are quite low, but obviously that's because we've been so strict with our protocols. So so the nurses would call me every day. I would get swab tests day 2 and day 12, and basically they say the moment you have a symptom, you have to call us and tell it to the doctor, and they get you swabbed. So it's really strict, and it's really kind of touch and go, but I guess we have to appreciate that, because that's why our cases have been quite good. Obviously, with the more recent news of Melbourne having a lot more cases, and unfortunate that the death toll is continuing to rise. It's I guess not so great, but the fact that the city immediately went into lockdown is hopefully an effective method for reducing the number of cases, which I think is slowly dwindling down in numbers. But obviously I have friends over in Melbourne who were just like, what, another lockdown, a second wave, and I have friends here in Perth that are like, we're probably going to have a second wave soon, just have to wait and see. But I would say overall, my opinion, like, the Australian government is very sort of focused on the well-being and health of its citizens. So the moment, code red strikes, like, it goes into emergency mode, people go on lockdown, businesses really shut down, and obviously it is affecting a lot of the people with businesses, especially small businesses and businesses that are not really thriving in this quarantine lockdown pandemic period. And the government is trying to help that with JobKeeper and JobSeeker, which has recently been extended till March next year. And childcare, levy and support and work from home and all these other support initiatives. So I think di Australia sih ya, compared to I guess mungkin other countries, we are doing okay. Obviously it's not the best, but we are still doing okay, because obviously in comparison with Indo, gue ada teman yang kayak gimana ya, kayak I've been speaking with my friend on Instagram, and she is just, I think her boyfriend is a doctor, so he is kind of like literally on the front line, and she has a cousin who's a nurse, so basically she has a lot of close loved ones who are risking their own lives and their own health being on the front line. Tapi setahu gue, walaupun kayak kalau di Australia kan swab test kan gratis, tapi di Indo kayak kalau lu di bandara a swab test is like 500,000 rupiah. Abis itu kalau di luar bandara kayak di Jakarta gitu kayaknya 80-an ribu deh. So it actually costs you to get swabbed. And then obviously like with things like lockdown in Australia, like it's definitely a very different environment, very different culture, very different society. So obviously we can't just drag and drop Australia's quarantine and lockdown precautions to improve Indonesia's. Because it's just an interesting way to, I guess, observe and analyze what's been going on between the two cities that you and I have lived in, and just to compare how both countries are dealing with the pandemic. Because obviously, for instance, there's things that Australia can do that Indonesia can do, and what Indonesia can't do as well, that Aussies can do. For instance, obviously, Australia, they make that curfew and that lockdown in place quite quickly in Melbourne, as well as recently in New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern placed the country, I think, in like a 12-day lockdown recently because there was a couple of cases popping up. The fact that the government can just quickly say, okay, lockdown will take effect like tomorrow, and then everyone just follows and the city is literally dead within 24 hours is something that cannot really happen in Indonesia, because there's just so much, I guess there's just so many differences, and there's just so much stuff that comes to play that you can't just simply, like in the click of a finger, or when a policy comes in place, you can just say boom, businesses that are not life sustaining need to shut down. Because in my opinion, Indonesia obviously can't do that due to the demographic. We are definitely a developing country, not as developed as Australia. I guess, to put bluntly, there's a lot more marginal people, which is, it's just a very sensitive topic, but I guess that is the harsh reality that we are facing, the Indo. I mean, even migrating to Australia from Indo, like there's just so much difference in the development of the cities, of the government itself, and placemaking and sort of the policies in place for citizens and the communities. So a simple lockdown precaution in Australia can't be implemented in Indo just because people need daily wages to live. Like, the economy is so different as well. Businesses can't just simply shut down from like a health point of view. So I think, I don't know, like, that's just been what's on my mind, I guess. Obviously, being stuck in a hotel, there's only so much you can do for 14 days. So, yeah, I've just been having a lot more conversations with friends di Indo dan di Aussie, dan kayak sebenarnya kita cuman kayak ngomongan belak-belakan aja gitu, kayak, oh, situasi gue kayak begini nih, situasi lu kayak gimana, oh, Aussie lumayan ya banyakan sih temen gue yang di Indo kan selalu bilang kayak, wah, kondisi di Aussie ya walaupun kesannya parah, tapi sebenarnya nggak terlalu parah ya, kayak obviously dibanding yang kondisi di Indo sekarang. Dan itu bener, kayak ya bener, tapi juga karena situasi kita dan environment kita, dan it's like there's so many factors that are different, so we can't obviously compare apples to apples. It's more of like an apples and oranges situation. So yeah, I don't know, that's just what's been going on in my mind. I mean, I guess it is a worry because obviously all of my relatives, I have a lot of family back home in Indonesia. They've just been stuck at home because most of my relatives are getting older. Grandparents, aunties and uncles, they're approaching older age. And especially for my grandparents, they've just been so paranoid that they haven't left the house because they are at risk of their age. And they have just been stuck at home the whole time. I mean, you know, thankfully their house is pretty big, and so they can still, you know, go about and do stuff. But, you know, I can't imagine not being able to go out and about, especially when you're in indoor. So yeah, it's more of like just like a reflection that I've been having when I was in quarantine. I just thought I just wanted to share with you, but also share it with our listeners. But yeah, so that's just been kind of my perspective, I guess my thoughts, my slight concerns, and yeah, I think, you know, the way US is doing it is somewhat similar to Australia. We've got like different zones, different codes, like different levels of quarantine, like red, blue, green, what have you. And most people during full lockdown have just been staying at home. So I think, again, Western countries, developed countries versus, you know, the developing countries, always a difference. Yeah, so hope you guys, you know, thought that this conversation, this episode was interesting or possibly even maybe insightful. It's more of like, I guess, a mind dump with regards to our experiences during lockdown and our own opinions of how things are, I guess, going and how what we think you know, is happening in Australia and in Indonesia specifically. Obviously, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Feel free to share with us what you think. You know, do you have also concerns and worries? What do you think the Australian or the Indonesian government could be doing better to improve you know, the livelihood and the future of its citizens, but as well as, you know, what do you think about, you know, the swab tests and all the medical health protocols that your country is doing for COVID? Do you think it's effective? Do you think the numbers are going down? And, you know, as always, if you are living in a city that has numerous cases, like, please wear a mask, you know. This is definitely a real disease. I don't think it's a government hoax. So, and, you know, wearing a mask is not, you know, a big laborious job, so it can really save a life if you you know, comply with it and follow it. And, you know, nothing wrong with a bit of social distancing as well, and make sure that, you know, you respect your community, and, you know, if you ever feel ill, please stay at home and just check yourself and take care before, you know, you may contaminate others. But yeah, we really hope that everyone is staying safe and taking care. All the best. We're sending all the love and good vibes your way wherever you are. And yeah, as always, let us know what you guys would like to for us to talk about next, or what other topics you guys would like us to open up about. But yeah, no, let us know how it's been for you with COVID and all that, and take care.
Thank you for listening.
Jangan lupa like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with your friends.
I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out with your comments, stories, and even questions on what we should talk about. See you in the next episode.
Bye. Dah.